Hello world, welcome to this edition of Tech on Fire with Blaze. I'm Blaze Stewart, architect at Winelect, and today we're going to be talking about Azure Policy to enforce tagging with Azure Resources. Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about Azure Policy, and in this week we're going to be talking about custom policies as it relates to tagging. Now last week we talked about custom policies and how you can use those in a more general sense. And we've done a video on tagging, and we're going to kind of bring those together today and talk about how you can enforce a tagging strategy on Azure using Azure Policy. So just a quick review of what you can use tagging for. This is just a quick way to organize resources on Azure. So you have basically key value pairs, and then you can use those pairs to create accountability and policy around those pairs so that you can control things like costing or organizational rules or things like that based on the way policies are driven. Our goal today is not so much to look at what is downstream of this, but to look at how you can actually enforce the policies themselves on Azure so that you'll guarantee that your resources will have tags associated with them on Azure. There's a bunch of types of tags that we can talk about, and these types of tags are really on a gradient. We'll talk about that in a moment, but the most basic kind of tags that we can have are generally going to be around functional tags. And this relates to application components and the apps themselves, and we're organizing Azure resources into, say, a given app. So we might have both of these tags, app and tier, present on a given Azure resource, and it might be associated with an e-commerce app, and it might be the back end tier or the front end tier or something like that. And you could organize resources using tags accordingly. You might also have something like a classification type tag, and this is more for administration of the resources. So you might have an SLA tag, for instance, and the SLA tag is going to determine what tier the application would fall into for business continuity reasons, such as a tier 0 app must be online 24/7 because it's a mission critical application. But something that's not, maybe you have a library that you're managing on your office campus, and that application wouldn't be considered mission critical. So you might put that in like a tier 2 or tier 3 app, and you could organize your SLAs using classifications with tags on your applications and resources. Also, you might want to look at something like accounting. This is typically used for cost management on Azure, and we're going to get into cost management in a future video where we can look at various things in Azure and how you can look at the various resources and get reporting out of your environment based on usage patterns and things like that. But one way to do that is using tags. And the accounting tags that we put on our resources are good for organizing the billing cycles that we have around our Azure resources so that we can take tags, apply those to our resources, and then when we go into our various kinds of reports, we can pull up a particular report based on a tag, and then we can use that to bill customers or bill internal resources if you're using a bill back model, and you can kind of see where your Azure usage is based on a particular business unit in your organization. You also might have something that's more functional tag for partnerships that talks about the outside the boundaries of your organization. This would be like who owns the application. So if you're running a particular application and you might have a external partner that you're working with, maybe it's a customer or maybe it's another partner, you can say who owns this resource, and that kind of resource can be tagged in that respect. It can also be used for internal tagging, such as an owner of a given resource, and that actually might be a person in your organization that's not in the business unit that's actually managing the Azure resources. And then finally, there is the purpose tags that we might talk about, and these are oriented around business processes. So we might think about a tag that talks about this being related to the processing of payroll, or it might be related to e-commerce sales or something like that, and there's a process associated with that, and it's more than just the application. It's more of a grand scope of things where we're trying to understand how these resources feed into a given process that provides some kind of business value out of that process. So these are just some general types of tags that we can talk about, and we think about these on a gradient here. So we have a gradient of different kinds of tags here. So from the top to the bottom, we're going from a more IT oriented physical implementation, resource organization, to something that's more abstract as we go down the list, to something that is more oriented around business value and that kind of thing. So tagging can be useful for all kinds of things. The basic thing here is to think about, when you're doing a tagging strategy, is to think about the best use cases of your tagging for your resources and how you want to use those. So our goal today is not to get into building out this kind of infrastructure for tagging, but is to get you thinking about how you can use tagging to organize your resources around some of these things. And then I'm going to show you how you can enforce tags on resources using Azure Policy, so that you can make sure those tags are there, and that will help facilitate some of these kinds of organizational things that you might use tagging for. So last week when we looked at policy on Azure, we looked at a custom policy when we had a different mode set. We had a mode set to all. Now, whenever we do mode all, it applies the policy to everything that can have a resource on Azure. However, whenever we want to look for a mode index, what we're looking for is one of two things. It either has a location associated with it, or it has tags associated with it. So anything that has a location or tags can be indexed in that respect. So if it's not indexed, that means it probably doesn't have a location field, or it doesn't support tags for a given resource. An example of that would be a route in a route table. So a route table is going to define routes for a given type of resource on Azure, and a route in that route table is a resource, and it's going to be bound more or less to that route table. And so it doesn't really need to have a tag or some kind of location associated with it. But for our purposes, we're going to be looking at the tags today, tags themselves. So we're going to be looking at resources that support tags. So that's why we're putting mode index on this, so that we don't get errors whenever we try to apply this to something that doesn't support tagging. So with that in mind, we're going to set up a policy rule here. And this is a very simple policy rule. It's basically just looking to see if certain things exist on a resource. So I want to enforce a tag called environment, unit, and shutdown. So this would be one of those tags that I mentioned earlier, where it's talking about one of those functional tags. This might be one of those accounting tags, and this might be one of those functional tags as well. But the purpose of this is basically to show what we're looking for our tag enforcement. So I want to make sure that all of my resources have these tags on them. And if it doesn't, then instead of just denying the creation of the resource, what I'm going to do is automatically add those. So that is one thing that you can do with policy, is you can do some kinds of remediation with them. It doesn't work on everything, but if something is out of compliance, and it's something pretty simple like tagging, what you can do with that then is append some tags to the resource and when it's created. So if I was to create a resource without tagging on it that did support tags and these weren't present, what it's going to attempt to do then is insert these tags here. And so it's going to tag it with a environment, a unit, and shutdown to guarantee that those will be on the resource when it is created. So that will make sure that it's there. And so once it's done, then it will have a default value of dev, the unit will be IT, and the shutdown policy would be never in this case. So I'm basically just going to have these default values for whenever those tags aren't present. So this is basically just to enforce some rules on Azure to guarantee that the tags will show up. So this is a very simple policy, very easy to implement. If I wanted to add more to it, I can just simply add another tag that I want to show up on my resources here and then enforce it accordingly. However, I can also do default values here. You could set this to deny if you want them to manually enter them, but this will guarantee that they are there in the event that they don't show up, and it will make sure that the tags are present with a default value. Sometimes it's not quite enough just to have a set of tags. You want to have a set of tags with a prescriptive set of values associated with them. So in this case, I can have a second policy that looks for tags with specific values in them. And so that's what this policy does. It's also very simple. It's basically saying if the tag unit that has a value outside of these four values here, then it's going to deny the creation of a resource, or deny that particular resource here. So this basically means that I only can put in 4 acceptable values into unit. So if I was having a bunch of business units, basically what I'd want to do is create a bunch of abbreviations across this array right here that would basically be the acceptable values for that unit. So you would make sure that when a resource is created, not only is the tag present, but that the tag's value is in a predefined set of values that we have. And the same thing for environment. If I wanted to make sure that every resource had a environment associated with it, I simply just put those here. I have dev, test, UAT, and prod. If I wanted to have more environments, I could add more, or if I only had maybe dev, UAT, and prod or something like that, I can have those. But this would guarantee that the value for environment is in a predefined set of lists. And so I can look at all of my dev resources, for instance, if I wanted to see what the consumption of that was, or if I wanted to apply a policy that only applied to dev resources, I could do that as well. So this is a very simple way to enforce predefined values on Azure tagging. However, it's not going to give me a drop-down list to choose from. It's basically just going to make sure that the values are there. So as of right now, I don't think there is a way to define predefined values in a drop-down, but it does enforce them as being there. And once you get used to putting them in, then most organizations will just simply get used to punching in one of these abbreviations here according to a policy that has been established in that organization. So I'm here in the Azure portal, and I want to go into policy, and I'm going to create some policies to do the enforcement of the things that I have already defined. So first thing I need to do is create some policy definitions. But before I do that, I want to show you the built-in policies as well. And there's another approach to doing what I'm going to be showing you in the demo today. So I'm going to come down here and deselect all. I'm going to come down here and select the category of tags. And this is going to give me a bunch of built-in policies that are already made for tagging purposes. So I can require a tag and its value on resources. And so these are all designed for singular tags on resources. So I can use these as well as the custom policies that I just showed you to do tag enforcement. So what this can do is I can do a bunch of single policies per tag, and then I can group those up and create a tagging initiative and apply that in much the same way as I was doing with a policy where I was looking for multiple tags in a single policy. I can do that similar approach with an initiative as well if I wanted to create a single tag and its value for a resource or whatever it might be, and then roll that up into an initiative and apply that all at once as well. But the bottom line is there are a couple ways to do that, and whichever one's going to work best for your organization is really up to you to define that. I'm just showing you one way using custom policy, and you can also do it using the built-in policies and initiatives as well to get basically the same behavior. But in any case, let's go ahead and create our custom policies with the code that we saw a minute ago. The reason I like the custom policy is because it seems a little bit simpler for the purposes that I'm using it for. But if you wanted to have the single policy per tag and then roll that up in an initiative, that'd be fine as well. So let's go ahead and give this a name, and I'll call it required tags, and I'm going to say required tags for resources, if I could spell right. And let's use an existing category here. Let's go down here to tags, and let's then go get the code and let's paste that in right here. This is going to be my required tags. And notice remember what this one is doing is it's actually doing the remediation of the tags as well. And let's pop that code in here. And so if a resource creates without tag, it's going to automatically add these. So that's what this policy does. And now that's been added, let's add in our second one that's going to do the required values. And I'm going to grab that code right here. And let's go back over to Visual Studio and pop that in. And let's set the location right here to this one. And to fit this particular subscription, I'm going to call it required tags for resources, and required tag values for resources. And this is going to pop the code in right here, and that should be what I need for this. I'm going to set the category to tags as well. And let's save this one. Now I have both my policy definitions inside of my tags that I already had defined here. I have tag set. If I wanted to see custom tag policies, there are the two that I'm going to be using for this demo. So let's go over to a resource group and apply these, or I can do the assignments right here. So I'm going to do an assign policy. And this is already pre-populated because I've used it before. It's the resource group that I'm using for this demo. It's tags demo. And I'm going to get the policy definitions, and those two should show up at the top right here. I'm going to do the required tags, and this is required tags. And let's do a review and create, and just go ahead and create this. And that's going to assign that policy to that resource group. And let's do the second one. Let's get the policy definition right here. And I didn't set a description on it, so it's just showing me the code for this one. And I'm just going to give it a assign name, use that for the description as well. And let's go over to review and create. And now both of my tags have been assigned to my resource group. Now that I've got that done, I'm going to come back over to my actual resource group, and let's try to create a resource in here. The first one I'm going to do is I'm going to create one. Let's do a storage account. I'm going to create a storage account, and I'm not going to set any tags on it. And I'm going to show you the remediation effects that these tags will have in the event that I don't add one. So let's do ACCT123 or something like that. That looks like it's not taken. Let's come over here to tags. I'm not going to set any tags here. I'm just going to simply leave that blank, and let's go over here to review and create. I'm just going to create the storage account, and I'm going to come back whenever this finishes, and it should have tags on it. Okay, it looks like my tags are there. Let's go back over here. Let's get into our resource, and there are my tags right there. Those are the 3 default tags that it added because I didn't tell it to add tags when I created the resource using that policy. So it automatically added these to my given resource because the policy was being enforced there. So let's come back over to my resource group again, and let's try a little different approach here. And this time I'm going to add in a storage account, and I'm going to select a storage account. Let's give it a name, ACTT321. Let's see if that was taken. Probably not. And I'm just going to click back over here to the tags. And now I'm going to put in the tags that I want to for my particular environment here. And then my unit, it's going to let's put in accounting for my unit. Oops. Unit here, ACCT. I'm going to put in a unit value that is outside the range of acceptable values. And then I'm going to put in the shutdown because that is a required tag. And I'm going to put none for the shutdown, which I don't really have a predefined value for that. So pretty much anything will go there. But this should fail because this is not inside of the predefined values, although that is. So let's go ahead and try and do a review and create here. And let's try to create this, and it should fail. So let's look at the error here now that it has failed. And you can see that this resource was disallowed by policy, which is okay. Let's look at the raw error. And it's saying it was disallowed by policy. And the reason why the required tag value for resource ID is not there. So let's try to recreate this resource then. And let's go to redeploy this guy. And I could come over here and redeploy it using the template here, or I could just recreate it back inside of the resource group. So I'm going to come back here, let's do a storage account right here, and let's go to create here. Let's give it the same name, ACT321, and come over to tags, and let's select environment. I'm going to select dev. Let's select unit, and I'm going to use accounting for my unit, and then shutdown for my policy. I'm going to say none or never for that. And now I have my tag set. This is an appropriate value, so this should allow me to create it. So let's go ahead and create this, and we'll come back when it's done. Okay, it looks like our resource created. So now I have the resource group with these tags on there. So now I have successfully employed policies that will add tags as well as enforce tags. So in a future video, we're going to look at how we can use these tags for various purposes like accounting and doing cost analysis and other things like that, and how we can use policy to help enforce tagging so that we can use that for other kind of functionality inside of Azure, such as Azure automation and cost analysis and a couple other things related to that. So this has been a video on how to use policy to enforce tagging. It's not, and then we're going to talk about some of the downstream implications of this in our future videos as we walk through security on Azure. If you like this content, please consider visiting us online at www.wintelect.com, and there you can find about services that Wintelect offers, including training and consulting services. Also, please consider subscribing to this channel by clicking on the subscribe button and clicking the bell icon to get notifications when new content becomes available, and also comment down below. You can also follow me on Twitter at @TheOneMule, and also follow Wintelect on Twitter at WintelectNow or at Wintelect. We are constantly posting things about Azure-related technologies and things related to software development. You can also reach us by email at consulting@wintelect.com. Until next time, thank you.